Hello students, this is chapter 18 from Microeconomics Pindai Rubenfeld, Externalities in Public Goods. So there are 7 subsections in this chapter. Okay, we will review the concept of externalities and all the way to public goods. Okay. Alright, externalities is when you have impact on parties which are not part of the transaction. For instance, there is an action between buyers and sellers, or consumers and producers, or between consumers, between producers, okay? But the impact of that action or that transaction occurs to someone else, external to that to the two parties. Okay, they were not involved in the exchange or in the production process. Yeah, so this is what we call externalities, and you can have negative externalities and you can have positive externalities. So in negative externalities, we look at the cost. Yeah, if something negative externality means there is a cost that is not seen in the transaction, which is a cost that occurs or that is incurred on an external party. Okay, so when we derive a marginal cost of producing 1 unit of a product, we should include the marginal cost to the producer and the marginal cost to the external party. Together, these two will become what we call the marginal social cost. Okay. Now let's take an example of a firm producing steel, but the byproduct of the steel production is pollution. Okay, then we call this negative externality because the pollution caused to the society is seldom included in the marginal cost, therefore the pricing of the steel. So if you see here, you have this MC, which is for the firm, and then the marginal external cost, which is for the pollution. For example, it goes into the river, the sea, so this is marginal cost. So if we add up the two, we add up this one plus this one, we add up and it goes, right? Yeah, so you have vertical summation. Vertical summation, so you should derive the MSC graph and the MSC curve. And with MSC compared to MSC, now let's say the firm is a perfect competition, so P equals to MR and then MR equals to MC, right? So P equals to MC alone here would give you this amount. Okay, but P equals to MSC will give you this amount. Alright, so what do you see? The quantity is less. Alright, although you still charge the same price. So this is good, right? We produce less, so we pollute less. Yeah? So we reduce the externality amount. Okay. Now in the next graph, we look at the industry. This is firm. Now this is the industry. Okay, so with the industry, and since industry has some, as an industry, they are monopolistic power or market power. So you see that the price is greater than the MR. Okay, so it means that you have a downward demand slope, downward sloping demand slope. Alright, but still the rule is the same. If you follow MC, that means you disregard the externality, then you will produce at Q1. But if you take MSC, then you will produce at Q star, right? You produce at Q star. The only difference now is that because you have a downward sloping demand curve, so price star is higher than P1. Okay, so what happens is that you produce less of the product and therefore pollute less, but the price of the product also increase. Okay, the price of the product also increase. So hopefully when increase, you have movement along, and then movement along will means that quantity will also fall in that sense. Okay, but actually it came from the MSC calculation. All right. What about positive externalities? For example, if there is a green landscape, yeah, although you are a factory, although you are a house, this is your house, you can do whatever you want. But let's say you maintain very nice landscape, and it gives a lot of carbon, it gives a lot of oxygen, it's very cooling to the eyes, and there's a lot of flora and fauna in that sense. Yeah, so we call this marginal external benefit, and it should be reflected in the demand. But because it is not, yeah, it is a benefit that is received by a third party, so it is not included in the demand, because the demand will be between the buyer and demand is buyer, seller is supply, right? So where do you put in this external benefit? It seldom is put into the market, demand and supply. So we call this an externality. Yeah, and when you add the demand by the buyer and the external benefit by the third party that is received by the third party, together you should get marginal social cost. Okay, the graph will be, the affected graph will be the demand graph. Yeah, this is a demand graph. So if this is the MEB, you do the the vertical summation, then you will get the MSB. Right? And then the MSB. Okay, so let's see where is the effect on price. And same thing, if the firm is perfect competition, so let's say price, this is the price, and this is also the MC to make things simple. But if you use the marginal demand and equals to MC in terms of supply, then you will be producing at this amount, Q1. But if you take into account the marginal external benefit, then you will be producing at Q prime or Q star. Yeah? Marginal social benefit here, so you'll be producing here. So what does it mean? It means that even if price is unchanged, but quantity of something that gives positive externality will increase. Okay. All right. We call externality a market failure because the demand, the demand or the supply does not reflect the total cost or total benefit to the society. So when the demand is wrongly positioned, doesn't capture all the benefits, then you get less. Yeah? But if you include the benefit of everyone in the society, then you should get more. So it is the position of your demand, just like before. It is the position of the cost to the society as a whole. So how do we correct market failure? Let's take an example of emission, factory emission. Okay, and emission is carbon dioxide, for instance, or mono SOx or NOx. Yeah, okay. But if it is carbon cost of emission, now let's look from the right. This is level of emission. Okay, and this is dollar per unit of emission. So from the right, you can see positively slope cost from the negative externality. What is the marginal external cost of pollution? Okay, so the higher the pollution, the higher the marginal external cost. Okay, it is not at a constant, it doesn't increase at a constant rate. Or if you look from the right, you see that the marginal external cost from pollution will fall when the level of pollution also falls. So it is positively sloped when you look from the right. And also from the left actually, but we look on the right. So this is the level of high pollution, and this one is zero pollution. Okay, so same thing, MCA. MCA is a marginal cost of abatement. It means that this is the cost of treating that emission or preventing the emission. So if there is no abatement at all, that means your MCA is 0. So your emission is very high at 26. Correct? Yeah. But as you continue in your effort to reduce emission, yeah, by paying for abatement, then the marginal cost of abatement increases, yeah, as more emission level. So just like anything, when you want to buy more or you want to spend more on something, the cost will go up. Okay, but between marginal external cost of having emission and the marginal cost of trying to reduce emission, yeah, that's the meaning of MEC, MCA. The optimal point is this one. So you see, you don't target for zero emission because that's not optimal. If you target for zero emission like this one, you won't get it, because this is the structure of your cost, MCA, and your MEC. So the most optimum point of correcting for emission or preventing emission is here. This is the 12. Yeah? So the emission level that is optimum is 12, because if you try to do less, if you try to do more, that means try to have emission that is even lower than 12, you will see that the cost of abatement is higher than the external cost due to the pollution itself. Alright, so in this case, yeah, it is not optimum to spend on preventing pollution when the effect or the cost of the pollution is much lower. Understood? Yeah? So we stop at 12. Alright, optionally we can use, like just now, we can use emission standard. That means this is the legal limit on the amount of pollutants that a firm can emit, for instance. Okay? So it can be achieved through imposing a standard or a limit here, or it can be achieved by imposing a fee. That means if you go beyond, you'll have to pay the difference, for instance. Yeah, if you go less, then we will give you carbon credit. But if you more, we'll make you pay more. Or we will do something with, the government can impose something so that you only achieve this much, this E level, which is for your factory. Okay. So in this case, let's say they charge this is the dollar per unit of emission. So at the equilibrium, the price is $3 per emission. So this is the amount, to the point they can reduce emission to the point that or you can see it from left or from right, but regardless, this is the amount that they should reduce emission, to that point. Okay. We use a fee. So the choice of the government in imposing fee also can be, they have two choices. They can charge a single emission fee or a single emission standard for all forms. Yeah. In different circumstances, imposing a fee is much cheaper than imposing a standard. Okay, so you will see the discussion. You can it's very simple. It's a discussion why standards is better in some cases, or why fees are better in some cases. But the idea is that you choose a target and you see the cost to the people, and it all mostly depends on on the position of your MSC and your MCA. Okay, where the more elastic the MCA, and in a situation where the MSC is more inelastic, then you have the pollution preferable. The standard is much more preferable. I said just now, the emission permit, where you can market permits. So some companies or some factories are emitting less than the standard. Some companies have happens to emit more than the standard. So that can be balanced if the company which produce less emission are paid by the companies which are producing more. So everyone on average still will be at the at the E sector. Yeah? So this is what we call a marketable emission permit. Yeah? There's a market for it. You can buy and sell the permission to emit. Okay, as long as a whole the economy or the country will have a certain maximum emission level, yeah, which if they decide just now like 12. That's all. Okay. One more aspect of market failure in terms of environment is recycling. Again, you can use the concept of MSC and MCR, yeah, marginal cost of recycling. This is similar to what you did just now, MCA, marginal cost of abatement. Though when you do not, when there's scrap, yeah, so no cost. Okay, but as you reduce reduce the amount of scrap by recycling, so the cost will increase. Okay, if you don't recycle, you have tons of maximum scrap, then that means there's no cost, there's no recycling effort even. Okay, so MCR is 0. But as you recycle, that means your scrap will decline, kan? More you recycle, then scrap will decline. So when scrap decline, in order to reduce scrap, you must spend money on recycling, and the MCR increases as you recycle more. Okay, so that's how you look at it from left to right, from right to left. The MSC also same thing. If you don't recycle, then the marginal cost to the society is high. But if you recycle, the marginal cost to the society will be lower. Alright, so where is the equilibrium point? Equilibrium point will be where the MSC MSC interacts with the MCR. Okay, MSC interact with MCR, the green and the purple. So this is the scrap amount. Again, it does not make sense to do more recycling. Yeah, it doesn't make sense to do more recycling less than that amount. It doesn't because the cost of recycling would have been higher than the cost of the marginal cost of not recycling. Okay, understood? All right. And you have refundable deposit for recycling, so that one can be, you can read. Okay, how to encourage people to recycle. Okay, many methods. Do look at the example seriously. All right, 18.3 is on stock externalities. Stock externality is when a certain emission, a certain negative externality or positive externality accumulate. Alright, so not like emission, it happens emission per month, per year, per day, that is a flow. But if you have emission every day, the stock will be GHG, yeah? Greenhouse emission, greenhouse gas will be the stock. Okay, so emission is the flow, but the GHG, greenhouse gas, will be the stock. Okay, so there is an example of a negative externality, negative stock externality. You can also have a positive stock externality. For example, R&D, every day, monthly, every period of time, there's always going to be a new paper, a new journal, in addition to the knowledge, yeah. But the stock will be the technology itself, which comes from innovation bit by bit over time, right? Okay, now let's come back to the example of GHG. Any stock in any year is given by the emissions generated that year plus the non-dissipated stock from the previous year. Now with emission, you also must consider dissipation rate. Okay, so you emit, yeah, so there's emission, and then it becomes stock, right? But at the same time, the GHG also disappears. Yeah, we call the simplest word is that it dissipates. But dissipation Yeah? But dissipation is very, very small. The rate of dissipation is very small compared to the rate of emission. But we still take into account both. Okay. So if you, for example, the first time you emit, okay, that's your stock. But next year, if your stock will increase, from 1 minus delta, let's say delta is the dissipation rate, so times the emission of the year after that. Okay, so every year you have to consider the starting stock plus the emission that is made in that year minus the dissipation rates in that year. But if n is infinitely large, so when you have s to the s sub infinity, the formula here will collapse to be just E over delta. Okay, which is the dissipation rate. Okay, so if we look at after, for example, 2100, the calculation blah 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 will go up 2000. And then in 100 years, from here to here is 100 years, you see the stock is 4337. And the damage will be, if 1 million per unit, it will be 4.337 billion. And the cost will be 1.5 billion if you started from the beginning, when E equals to not having this is a zero emission cost. Cost of not emission, no pollution at all. Cost of zero emission is 1.5. So that means you avoid emission from the very beginning by using green technologies or by, so the cost there. This cost is spent from the beginning. So even if you use the net present value, it is still better than you wait until the cost is higher. Because the damage is very, very high. So better to spend now. So we say so that the net benefit, even after you apply the net present value, it is still positive. Okay, now the cost here, why is it constant 1.5? It's actually, this is the cost at the beginning. So there is no pollution at all. If you spend at the beginning, we call this cost of action. Cost of action. That means you avoid pollution from the beginning rather than cost of inaction. Inaction means if you don't do anything, this is the cost to the society, 4.3 billion. So how do you compare this? Of course, this is better. Although you spend money now to avoid pollution, it's still better than, it is still cheaper than the cost of trying to cover for the damage for the pollution 100 years from now. Okay, even if you have a NPV. Okay, all right. So you can read this example, the NPVs, which is actually with the discount rate. The discount rate also depends on what's the social rate of discount. It may not be the same R that you use for your company private calculation, CAPM. Social rate may be more or may be less. Depends on the expected rate of real economic growth, the extent of risk aversion of the society. If the society really doesn't like it, so they will put a high discount rate. And the rate of pure time preference for the society as a whole. Okay. And the inflation effect, change in price and so on. Okay, please read up this example. Extremely exciting and interesting. Okay, 18.4 will continue in the next